And I'm about to share the screen. So I have pushed record. No one has to remind me, thankfully. Okay. So today, I didn't put the name of what we're doing, but so it's planetary strength and why it matters. And I want to talk a little bit about why it matters for just a second. So one of the things that I tend to notice on Reddit quite often is people write in saying things like, my love life sucks, why? Or nothing in my life is going right, why? Or I'm trying to have children. I'm trying to have children, why isn't it happening? Or I'll see, on the other hand, questions. Like this morning, how many children, what gender will my children be? How many children will I have? And will I have children? I'm definitely afraid that I'm not going to. And often what I tend to see is most astrologers find a way to say yes. And often they'll say yes when the answer really should be, if the significators are mixed or no, or possibly no. And so, and one of the reasons that I think it gets missed is because of planetary strength. People aren't really thinking about strength as an issue where planets are being how they function, being or indicating how well they function or how badly they function. And so that's something we're going to get to in a second. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to take out a piece of paper and I want you to duplicate this table. And so you're going to write planets, it's going to be 3 columns and 8 rows, and planet, sign, and dignity or detriment. And you'll understand what that means later as we continue. But so go ahead and just start with that. Write those 3 down, and then write down all of the signs and write them in this order. So this is the Chaldean order, and we'll talk about that in a second. And so you want to write those planets down, and then you also want to write down the sign that each of those planets is in. So give yourself a second to do that. Just kind of write down. And so I'm going to actually do it with you. So for me, I have Saturn in Pisces. I have Jupiter in Gemini. I have Mars in Aquarius. I have the Sun in Capricorn. I have Venus in Aquarius. I have Mercury in Sagittarius. And I have Moon in Aries. Okay, so that's what that should look like for now. So some of you may have an idea here and there of what planets rule what signs, and of course we went over it last week and we're going to talk about it again today. So the Chaldean order, and who are the Chaldeans? The Chaldeans in the ancient world were the astrologers. They were the stargazers. They were the great astronomical scientists and diviners of the stars. And Chaldea is modern day Mesopotamia, which is modern day Baghdad, or modern day Iraq. Right, so Baghdad, Babylon was part of Chaldea or part of Mesopotamia, and so the Chaldeans are essentially Iraqis. Okay, so or maybe ancient Iraqi. So might be a different like Shia organization that in that particular time period. But what we know as Iraq is really that region of Chaldea. And like I said, the Chaldeans were known to be the astrologers. I'm talking about 1st century AD, like 100, 200 AD, like that's even before that, the BC period. The Chaldeans were known for being the important astrologers. So this Chaldean order is interesting and important because what ends up happening is the order is from slowest to fastest. So Saturn is the slowest planet. We're only dealing with the 7 classical planets. We're not dealing with the outers right now. Saturn is the slowest. Then comes Jupiter, then Mars, then Sun, then Venus, then Mercury, then Moon. So the Moon is the fastest planet of all 7. So this may not really matter right now, but a few weeks later, when we start looking at aspects, or when I do my little workshop on aspects, this is going to make a lot of difference. This is going to be really important, because I don't know if you've ever heard the term applying or separating, but an applying aspect is different from a separating aspect, and it all has to do with the relationship between a faster moving planet and a slower moving planet. So when you're looking at your aspects, those things are going to be important. Right now, people don't really do this very much, but definitely it's an important thing to factor in. And there was a technique, and we'll maybe talk about that down the road, or you can look at it yourself while I kind of talk. There was a technique in the Middle Ages that they only looked at the closest applying aspect between two of the seven classical planets. So only the closest applying aspect was really, really taken into consideration. And I've come to call that a signature. So that's, if any of you know what I'm talking about, you can go ahead and try to find that as we go through the class. Otherwise, I will be coming back to that when we talk about aspects. So slowest to fastest, Saturn to Moon. Moon is the fastest, Saturn is the slowest. The next three after that are Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Those are fastest to slowest. So Uranus is faster than Neptune, Neptune is faster than Pluto, and Pluto is the very, very slowest. We can also categorize planets as benefic and malefic. And for this particular session, where we're talking about planetary strength and whether it matters, benefic and malefic really does have quite a bit of an influence or an impact on the situation. So a bunch of these things have been kind of, like I said, either smeared over or glossed over as we've come into the modern era. Hi, everybody. Those of you, I've just started. We were just talking about, let me just recap very quickly since we just have a few people come up. If you've just started with me, what I'd love for you to do is find a piece of paper and a pencil and create this table. Okay, so it's a three columns and 8 rows. Okay, and you're going to do exactly this. You're going to put Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, and then you're going to put the zodiac signs that those planets are in. If you have a problem finding that, or if you don't know how to do that, then I would just wait until we come to when we use it, and then we can work with it. But I just want to kind of set that up for it now. But just kind of as I'm talking, be continuing to kind of look at where these planets are, what signs they are, because what I tend to notice about how people are entering astrology is most people are entering astrology through the zodiac signs. And there's a whole, gestalt of kind of zodiac sign talk and all of that, but it's not really astrology. It's really kind of shallow horoscopy, so to speak, in kind of a way. But remember, and we're going to come to it in just a second, the signs are emanations of the planets, and we're going to talk about that as a reminder as well. So once again, in order to kind of soften the blow and to soften the deterministic blow of ancient astrology, there has been this kind of glossing over about benefic versus malefic. But look, there are planets that bring good. And so Venus is the lesser benefic, and she brings benefit through pleasure. And Jupiter is the greater benefic, and he brings benefit through increase. Okay, so he's the Lord of increase. She's the lady of pleasure and amusements and love. Okay, so that's how they bring benefit. The sun rules fame, rank and fame. Right? So that's how he operates as a benefic planet. However, we're going to talk about the sun in just a second. Okay, so malefic planets are Saturn and Mars. So Saturn is the greater benefic in that he can fully inhibit, right? Saturn is obstacles, right? So as a result, he can fully inhibit the thing that we're going for. And Mars is the lesser benefic. He can create doubt. He can create contentions that get in the way, and he can also cut things off suddenly. So think about if anybody's ever been in a relationship that seemed like it was going really well, and then all of a sudden the person breaks up. That's a Mars influence. That's a Mars expression. So those are the two ways in which the malefic planets, Saturn and Mars, can operate and either fuck things up or stop up the works or make everything really difficult and make things difficult and contentious. Let's see. Did I say benefic? Sorry about that. Yes, I did mean malefic. Malefic planets are Saturn and Mars. Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you very much. So yes, benefic are Sun, Jupiter, and Venus. Malefic planets are Saturn and Mars. And then we have what we call the mutable and convertible planets. So they're common to good and bad, or bad. And that's Moon and Mercury. Okay, so Mercury, we're going to talk about Mercury's very interesting position, or very, very interesting, what's the word I'm looking for, kind of role. Mercury is one of the most complex and interesting planets of all of them, of all of the planets, because he is so mutable and convertible and neutral and hermaphrodite. So he can be male or he can be female. He can be good. He can be bad. He can go bad. He can do all kinds of things. He, she, slash, it, they, whatever. Since we're talking about all these pronouns, that's Mercury influence. All these different pronouns to affect, to identify. Okay, so any planet can act in a benefic or malefic manner. Okay, so even though we have this classification, Sun, rank and fame as a benefic, Jupiter is a benefic, Venus is a benefic, malefic planets, Saturn and Mars, and then the mutable and convertible, any planet can act in a benefic or malefic manner. The condition of the planet determines which way it will go. Now, this is the first way in which it matters. So in which planetary strength matters, because, well, we'll see as we come to it, but just keep thinking about this. The condition of the planet determines whether or not it acts in a benefic or malefic manner. All right? Sign placement is especially important, and we're going to come to that in a little bit. The Sun acts in a malefic manner when in bodily conjunction with any other planet. This is called combustion. So when a planet is within 8 degrees and 30 minutes of the Sun, actually, by the time a planet goes to within, actually, let me write this out. There are 3 stages, three stages of combustion. The first stage is called under the rays. And that's when a planet is within 12 to 15 degrees of the Sun. Okay, and so at that point, the planet is going under the rays, and the planet that is not the Sun is gradually weakening more and more. Now, as astrologers, do not ignore combustion. It is a real thing, and it really, really, really has an important effect. We're going to talk about it a little bit more later. Not too much more, but so when we get to full combustion, is when the planet is within 8 degrees and 30 minutes. And shall we say 16 minutes of the Sun. This is when full combustion is when the Sun is completely fucked. All right? Then there's this thing called casimi, and that's when the planet is within 16 minutes to exact. That is called being in the heart of the Sun. Okay, so that's the heart of the Sun, and the planet is strengthened. It's supernaturally strengthened, or supposed to be. So the jury is kind of out on this on this particular thing. It was definitely considered to be a real thing for hundreds of years. But a lot of people, first of all, it's rare to find. And secondly, a lot of people these days don't really think that it really does anything. Now, last week when we looked at the ascendant, we looked at Oprah Winfrey. And Oprah Winfrey is one of the richest women in the world. But if you look at her chart, it doesn't really look like that wealthy a chart. Like it shouldn't necessarily be that majorly kind of wealthy, but she has 2 planets in casimi. And so it makes me wonder if indeed and it's in the 2nd house. It makes me wonder if it has something to do with that casimi. All right, so under the rays, full combustion and casimi, that's both ways, right? So if the planet goes, if it's a faster planet than the sun, it will be going towards the sun. It'll go under the rays. It'll go into full combustion. It will go casimi, and then it will go back into full combustion, back under the rays, and out. What is that? Do under the beams apply to outer planets too? Does the ascendant play into this? No, right? The ascendant is not a planet. The ascendant is an angle. That would just mean that the sun is conjunct the ascendant. The Lord of the Ascendant, however, which we talked about last week, definitely will. Does under the beams apply to outer planets too? It does, but I don't really use the outer planets that much. So yes, I would say it does. Now, however, here's the thing. We're looking at, and we're actually hold that point, because I would say on some level, yes, and on some level, no, because there's one of the main ways in which we're looking at this why does it matter thing is something I'm going to come to in a second. And so let me get to that, and then I'll come back to that question. Yes, and please feel free at any time to ask questions. I mean, I'll also kind of stop during certain sections and ask, and I was going to actually stop after this section. So here we are with the meanings of the planets. I just wrote out a few, and I also included what they are universal rulers of. So if you remember, I was just talking about how Jupiter is increase and is the universal ruler of increase, and Venus is the universal ruler of pleasure, so or love or marriage. So all of the planets are like that. So here we have seriousness, responsibility, and depression for Saturn. So those are more descriptions of kind of his nature, restriction and obstacles. But then he represents agriculture and old age and things that are old. All right, so he represents things that are aged and maturity. Jupiter represents virtue, truth, increase. Okay, now here we go into the universal. Matter of fact, all of these are his universal significations: virtue, truth, increase, fertility, wealth, justice. Those are all the things that he's kind of known for. He also represents bishops and priests, because he represents faith. Okay, now he's not religion, that's another planet. So Mars, courage, action, bravery, anger, violence, doubt. Mars is the universal significator for brothers. So something to think about. I mean, he's also the universal significator for soldiers, right? For martial artists, things of that nature, but for iron. The sun, recognition, arrogance, royalty. Now here we come into his kind of ancient significations. The sun is the giver of life. And so as a result, the sun rules healing. Right, so remember, it's the sun who gives the caduceus to Mercury. That the caduceus is the staff with the 2 snakes, right, on top of it, which has come to represent health and healing. Apollo gives that to Hermes. So the sun gives that to Mercury. And when you think the sun is healing and Mercury is skill, and Mercury is learning and skill. So there's that whole kind of connection. So that's where the healing comes from. The next is divination. And so the moon and the sun are the 2 lights in the sky, and they are the eyes in the sky. They are the 2 eyes of the sky. the sun represents the right eye in a man and the left eye in a woman, and vice versa. So the moon is the right eye in a woman and the left eye in a man. So as a result, the sun and the moon are both eyes. And the sun, have you ever heard like the term of how everything is so much better in sunlight, or when you want to find out what a secret is, just add some sunlight to it? So the sun has this kind of searchlight laser beam quality of revealing, of revelation. From the sun comes this ability to reveal. And so that's what you need for things like astrology, for things like prophecy, for things like psychic phenomena. So divination, for things like tarot, those kind of things where you're divining anything. So those kinds of things are represented by the sun. Gold and fame. All right, so these are some, so notice I didn't say anything about ego or self, right? I didn't say any of that. These are the actual universal significators for the sun. Venus is the lady of love and marriage, and she also is the universal significator for beauty, pleasure, sex, and mirth. Mirth is humor and enjoy and kind of light, frivolous laughter and enjoyment. You know, that's so that kind of thing. So anything by which you take enjoyment and pleasure in, enjoyment of and pleasure in, that is. All right. Mercury is the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Buying and selling. It's interesting because when I see people on Reddit talk about many of these planets, I see them use very cursory and very shallow kind of keywords for these planets. And if you remember from last week, most of you were in last week, one of the things that I will continue to say is the more that you know, the more that you're going to be able to do with astrology. The more that you know about the planets, the more when you see a chart, something will come up. You have to have a modicum of knowledge in order to really be able to use your intuition in astrology. Right? So what you see is a lot of people talk about, oh, I just kind of, focus on the chart and intuit or whatever. That's fine if it's accurate. But if you want to really be accurate, and make people be like, oh my God, you nailed it. The more you know about this kind of stuff, about what the actual planets are like, completely separate from what they mean for me, but what they themselves are like, the more you will be able to understand what's going on in the chart that you look at, including your own. Reading, writing, and arithmetic, buying and selling, learning, intelligence, and youth. So there are 2 Latin words, senex and puer. So Saturn is the senex, S-E-N-E-X, and Mercury is the puer, P-U-E-R. And some of you may have heard about the Wendy and Peter Pan complex, the Peter Pan complex, which is the eternal puer, the eternal child. And so Mercury is the eternal child. Moon, Fortuna. So if you, I don't think, maybe only one of you was at the first, but we talked about the moon as Fortuna because she's the one that really represents whether things will happen or not in a chart. Feelings, needs, reflexes. The moon represents our reflexes, what we reflexively go for when we react to stimulus. And she is the significator for women. All right? So we have our idea of what the planets are. And so whenever we're doing anything with the chart, we always want to be taking into account the specific nature of the planet, right? So that's one of the very first things we want to do. Okay, so 2 ways in which planets are rendered strong or weak. Any questions here? Let's stop there. So that was where I was going to stop because we were moving into this next section. Anything? All right. So 2 ways in which planets are rendered strong or weak. By essential dignity, which is they can be strengthened or weakened by sign placement, and accidental dignity, and which means they can be strengthened or weakened by house placement, which this means that you can have a planet that's strong by sign that's weak by house, right? So actually I was in class with one of our people here 2 days ago, and we were talking about the Grand Trine. And we were talking about kind of what it represents or what my idea of kind of it was. And she said, with all those together, is that good or bad? And I said, well, you know what? Astrology is traditionally ruled by Mercury. And one of the things that Mercury rules is mixtures. And so Mercury is common to good and bad. And so what we're going to see in astrology is that it's better to kind of leave this concept of is it good or bad to the side, even though you're not going to. I mean, but to also wonder how specifically is it functioning? So how is it specific? Not so much is that good or is that bad, but how specifically is it functioning? How are all of these factors, or how do all of these factors kind of pile up to either make this planet work really, really well, and what does that mean, or really, really badly, and what does that mean? So what are the specifics of it? So now I'm going to come back to the question, which was, does this include outer planets? Because this is the reason why it matters. The good or bad of the house, or of an astrological house, let's just be totally clear, emanates from its planetary ruler. And let's even say from the state of. Okay, so even that. So the good or bad of an astrological house emanates from the state of its planetary ruler. So as far as combustion is concerned, as far as any kind of debilitation is concerned, as far as any kind of debilitation is concerned, I'm going to go Mercury on you and tell you two contradicting things. In a natal chart, anything can be made to work. However, and that is on a personal level. However, it's the houses that are ruled by the planet who is weakened that are affected. So ultimately, what ends up happening is when I see people who say, "My love life sucks," or people who say, I'm trying to have children and I can't, invariably, I tend to see something going on with these two. You almost always, though, the thing by sign. Now we're going to talk a little bit about other factors that will weaken or strengthen a planet, and often we'll see that. But definitely, where the planet is by sign matters. And that's one of the most important things that I've noticed as I've been in Reddit, is that people don't really pay enough attention, and as a result, make prognostications that really might be incorrect, but also might be what people want to hear, right? They might not be doing it because people want to hear it, but they might be doing it because they really just don't know enough, and they really don't just know enough to really look at what signs are being occupied. Okay, so once again, the good or bad of an astrological house emanates from the state of its planetary ruler. Very important, write that down. And think on it as you kind of look at charts. So the other thing that I also tend to notice is that people are preoccupied with planets in houses. They don't look at the planets who rule the houses. And that's the most important thing. So somebody will say, "Oh yeah, something's going to happen. Look, Jupiter is there." And you say, "Oh, Jupiter's there, but what kind of zodiacal state is he in? He's not looking so good." And the ruler, but what about the ruler of that house? What kind of state is that planet in? And this is how you can start to make specific prognostications about what's going on. So, essential dignity is a method of measurement used to gauge the strength or weakness of a planet by sign placement. There are 5 levels of essential dignities. Each of these levels is given a number of points. And when we come to essential dignity, I mean, I kind of debated with myself as to whether I wanted to bring the essential dignity discussion into this particular workshop, but I thought, you know what, leave them wanting more instead of wishing there were less. So we're only going to talk about 2 pairs of essential dignities. So it's pairs. So it's domicile and exaltation and their opposite. Because really, those are the ones that when I see a planet in its domicile, or a planet in its exaltation, or a planet in the opposite signs of those, which we're going to talk about in a second, that's when I really am like, oh, dude, you missed it. You know, or if they're like, yeah, 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 and it's in the opposite side of the domicile or the exaltation, then that's when I'm like, you missed the boat there. So domicile. Domicile is a sign which is which is of the same substance of the planet and owned / ruled by the planet. We talked about this last week, and I brought some of that material back in. Exaltation or kingdom, which we did not talk about. So I just discovered this term for exaltation. I'm one of my old, like 9th century or 8th century books that I've been reading. And it uses the term kingdom, and I really like that for it. It uses quite a few terms that I think I'm going to start adopting. But so that's kind of a way of looking at the difference between them. A domicile, which is where a person lives and is completely comfortable and, lord of their house, and a kingdom, which is much different, which an empire of sorts, right? And there's a much more, there's a more exalted kind of implication to kingdom, but there's also a more precarious implication to kingdom as well, or empire. So, and we're going to talk about that. Or rather, we are talking about that. This is from last week. And so for anybody who wasn't in last week, we talked about how the astrological planets work, how the zodiac signs are androgynous pairs of each planet. Okay, so each planet contains contains two emanations. It contains a masculine diurnal or daytime expression and a feminine nocturnal or nighttime expression. Every planet, except for the sun and moon, who operate as one composite, and the sun rules only a daytime sign, and the moon rules only a nighttime sign. So the sun rules Leo, which is a day sign and a masculine sign. The moon rules Cancer, which is a female sign and a nighttime sign. Now, for those of you who weren't here last week, we talked about masculine and feminine signs and all of that. And so our masculine signs are the odd numbered signs, 1, 3, 5, 9, 11, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. And they are also the air and fire signs. I'm not going to write that down. You all can write that down yourself. And then the feminine signs are the even numbered signs, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and they are the earth and water signs. Okay? So going through it, the sun rules Leo, the moon rules Cancer. So the sun is the daytime eye, the moon is the nighttime eye. Then we have Mercury. Mercury rules, his daytime expression is Gemini, his nighttime expression is Virgo. And remember, daytime means masculine, nighttime means feminine. Venus's daytime expression is Libra, her nighttime expression is Taurus. Mars's daytime expression is Aries, his nighttime expression is Scorpio. Jupiter's daytime expression is Sagittarius. His nighttime expression is Pisces. For those of you who are new, we're not using the outer planets to represent any signs, to rule signs. We're only using the classical 7. And Saturn, Aquarius is his daytime expression, his masculine daytime expression, and Capricorn is his feminine nighttime expression. Notice, if a planet occupies either of the signs it owns, it is in its domicile and considered strong and durable in effect. An example is Mercury in Gemini. Mercury is in his domicile of Gemini. Gemini is the masculine diurnal expression of Mercury, and a planet in its own domicile is like a person at home in their own rule. Okay, so there's two ways in which then this planet is going to be fortified by being in a sign that it rules. Remember that the signs are made of the same substance as the planet. So that means that whatever are the planet's universal significations, they will be able to produce those, right? We just talked about it. Venus is the lady of marriage. Jupiter represents increase. So let's take Jupiter, for example. He's in Sagittarius, especially if he's in Pisces, which is I'll call a fertile sign. So that's a fertile, and we're talking about the 5th house. Let's say somebody has Jupiter in the 5th house in Pisces, and it's Yeah, Pisces on the cusp of the 5th. That's a very fertile chart. That's a very fertile indicator, right? Because Jupiter represents increase in fertility. Pisces is a fertile sign. And then Jupiter himself is in his own sign. So he can increase. He can make things bigger. He can create more. He can multiply things. So that's one of the ways in which a planet is fortified by being located in its own sign. And then I just gave you the second way. If Jupiter is ruler of the 5th, let's say Sagittarius is on the 5th house. Okay. Beauteous. All right. So we've been talking about essential dignity. We've been talking, let's see, kingdom. Oh, we just talked about that. Okay. Okay, here's where we were. So, oh, right, a planet in its own domicile is like a person at home in their own rule. We were talking about if Jupiter were ruler of the 5th, right? If it were in the 5th or ruler of the, so Jupiter is increase and fecundity and fertility. And so in his own sign, he can act in that capacity. And then if he's ruler of the 5th, he can produce children because the 5th house is the house of children. So that's where I was kind of going with that. The exaltations of the planets. So as I mentioned, each planet is also exalted in a sign, right? So every planet owns 2 signs, except for the sun and the moon. And then all 7 planets are exalted in a sign. And so I've got a cool, yes. All right. All right. So can everybody see this? Just kind of, will somebody chat in and say if they can see this new thing that I put up? Okay, great, thank you. Beautiful. All right, so we used this last week, and we can, and this will give us a really good way of understanding not just the signs that are ruled by planets and the signs that exalt planets, but also the opposites, right? So also they're opposites, and so we're going to talk about that. We're going to use that to talk about that. Here's Aries in the eastern part, right? So last week we talked about how the ascendant is your personal east, right? So we talked about that last week. And so here is Aries in the east, which makes perfect sense. So as you can see, as far as rulership is concerned, Mars is the ruler of Aries, but the sun is exalted in Aries. Okay, so remember we were using the term domicile and kingdom for rulership and exaltation. So Aries is the domicile of Mars. Get into the feeling of that sentence. Aries is the domicile of Mars. That would be like me saying 25 Gemini Street is my domicile. That's where I live. That's where I come home, take my shoes off, get comfortable, designs things the way that I want them, organize things in the way that I want them. Everything is the way that I want it. Okay, so that's domicile. Aries is the kingdom of the sun. So can you feel the difference between domicile and kingdom? Aries is the kingdom of the sun. The sun is exalted there and rules over, but it's not his home. He's not at home. There's a famous African-American, or was famous actually, a historically famous African-American performer of the 20th century. Her name is Josephine Baker. And I use her as an example of exaltation because Josephine Baker was a dancer in the chorus line in New York. She did a lot of the black around the time that she was. This is the 20s, and so these all-black reviews were becoming popular on Broadway. Broadway's called the Great White Way. So, all of a sudden you've got these completely black reviews, and they were become really, really popular, but starting in the early 20s. And she was in one of them, and they went to Paris for a tour. And while they were in Paris, she ended up kind of getting up and performing at a nightclub and taking Paris by storm and becoming this huge megastar in Paris, right? So at home, in her domicile, things were ho-hum, but in Paris, in this completely other place, all of a sudden she's a queen. That's exaltation. Okay, that's exaltation. That's an example of exaltation. All right, so Taurus is the domicile of Venus. It is the kingdom of the moon. Taurus is the moon's kingdom. Gemini is Mercury's domicile, and look how it's given the north node the exaltation of Gemini. So it hasn't given the north node or the south node rulership of any planets. This is different from Jyotish, where the north node is given co-rulership of Aquarius, and the south node is given the co-rulership of Scorpio. So we're talking about two totally different traditions, but know that when you're dealing with the nodes, it's coming from the Indian tradition. There is no really, that's the word I'm looking for, there is no really concrete tradition around the nodes. It's always been quite nebulous. There's a very, very extensive and concrete tradition in Vedic astrology. Cancer is the domicile of the moon and the kingdom of Jupiter. Leo is the domicile of the sun. Virgo is the domicile of Mercury and the kingdom of Mercury. This is the only planet who is exalted in his domicile. Mercury is the only planet who is exalted in his own domicile. Libra is the domicile of Venus and the kingdom of Saturn. Scorpio is the domicile of Mars. Sagittarius is the domicile of Jupiter and the exaltation or kingdom of the south node. Capricorn is the domicile of Saturn and the exaltation of Mars. Aquarius is the domicile of Saturn. Pisces is the domicile of Jupiter and the exaltation of Venus. Now, you're going to have to just memorize these, right? You're going to have to just memorize these, because this is really important. These are really important, and it does make a difference. It makes a difference for the good or bad. Remember, though, there are two ways in which a planet can be strengthened. If we're talking about being strengthened right now, we're talking about essential dignity. Essential dignity is inherent strength of the planet, right? It's what sign it's in. It's what the planet's expressing and how it's expressing. Accidental dignity is where that planet just happens to be. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, Mercury does have a fall, but we haven't talked about it yet. We haven't gotten to the fall. Remember, we're talking about only domicile and exaltation yet. Somebody asked, so Mercury has no fall. All of the planets have falls, right? All of the planets have falls. So I'm going to go back to this for just a second and then come back to this. Okay, so as I just said, a planet in its exaltation is like a person who is in their own kingdom and glory. Exaltation is considered less grounded and durable than domicile. Okay, what I want to talk about now is we're going to move into essential debility, and so I want to talk about signs that are opposite. So just as there are 6 androgynous pairs, right, for the planets, there are 6 pairs of opposites. And opposites always fall in complementary elements or in the same gender. Now that we know that odd signs are masculine and are either air or fire, then we know that if signs that oppose each other are always of the same gender, which means what? They're going to be either air or fire. They're going to be air and fire. So Aries is a fire sign. It's opposed by Libra, which is an air sign. Taurus is oh, got someone new coming in. Hi there, welcome. So Taurus is an earth sign, opposed by Scorpio, which is a water sign. So masculine, feminine, we come back to a masculine pair. Gemini is an air sign, opposed by a fire sign, Sagittarius, feminine. Cancer is a water sign, opposed by an earth sign, which is Capricorn, masculine. Leo is a fire sign, opposed by Aquarius, which is an air sign, and feminine. Virgo is a earth sign, opposed by a water sign, Pisces. Masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine. Okay, we're going to go back now. To our other chart. Okay, so our 2 pairs are, or our 6 pairs are Aries and Libra. Okay, so that's the beginning. 2 masculine signs. The ruler of Aries is Mars. The ruler of Libra is Venus. This means that when these planets are in the opposite signs of the ones in which they rule. So when a planet is in the opposite sign, excuse me, to its domicile, it is in detriment or estrangement. That's another of those terms that I just learned that I really like. So the domicile of Mars is Aries. The detriment of Mars is Libra, because Libra is opposite to Aries. Okay, and vice versa. The domicile of Libra is Venus. Right, sorry, the domicile of Venus is Libra. The detriment of Venus is Aries. That's their first detriments. So once again, and I have another chart that really shows this, but I just kind of want to show you this based on the oppositions of the signs. So the opposite of Aries is Libra. Aries is ruled by Mars. Venus is Libra is ruled by Venus. When Mars is in Libra, he is in detriment. He is detrimented. When Venus is in Aries, she is detrimented. Okay? Going to their next pair. Venus rules Taurus, Mars rules Scorpio. When Mars is in Taurus, he is detrimented. He is in detriment. When Venus is in Scorpio, she is in detriment. Mercury and Jupiter. So if you remember last week when we talked, I talked about how the Mars and Venus signs oppose each other. The Mercury and Jupiter signs oppose each other, right? Gemini and Sagittarius, Virgo and Pisces. And then Saturn opposes both signs of the lights. So we've got Mars and Venus, Mercury and Jupiter, and then Saturn and the lights. Okay, so that's always how it's going to work. So that means what you could do is, in order to find the detriment of a planet, is switch them, right? The moon should go there, Saturn should go here. So that's an easy way, but we're going to go through it like we just did. So the domicile of Mercury is Gemini, his detriment is Sagittarius. The domicile of Jupiter is Sagittarius, his detriment is Gemini. The domicile of the moon is Cancer, her detriment is Capricorn. The domicile of Saturn is Capricorn, his detriment is Cancer. The domicile of the sun is Leo, his detriment is Aquarius. The domicile of Saturn is Aquarius, his detriment is Leo. I've got a question. Is that why Saturn is the greater? Yes, yes, it is. It is one of the reasons. It is one of the reasons. Very good question. Actually, it's a question that implies quite a few things, whether you know it or not. But yes, in a nutshell, yes. Excellent question. We just did that. Oh, so the domicile of Mercury, the domicile and exaltation of Mercury is Virgo, which means that his detriment and fall is Pisces. So for the person who asked if Mercury has no fall, he indeed does. His fall is Pisces. We're going to get to fall in a second. Jupiter's domicile is Pisces. His detriment is Virgo. And I think we got to everybody there. All right. So now let's look at the exaltation signs. And the same thing applies. If a planet is in the opposite sign from the sign in which it is exalted, it is called in fall or slavery. And I really like slavery too, because slavery implies that the planet has no power of its own, no free will of its own. And we're going to talk about another slight form of debilitation called peregrine or peregrination, where we kind of talk about that a little bit further. But understand that if a planet is not in a sign that it rules or a sign in which it is exalted, it's in a sign of another planet, and that planet will dictate how the planet in its sign works. So I know you're like, what the hell? So this is how I'm going to express it. Mars is in Sagittarius. Okay, he's not exalted there. He's not in his domicile there. And so that means that his operations are all at the behest of the planet who rules Sagittarius, who is Jupiter. So when a planet is in detriment or fall, they are even more so at the behest of the planet, and they are acting in a way that is not. So remember what I said about domicile. When a planet's in its domicile, one of the main things that domicile does for it is it gives it the ability to express itself as per its own nature, in accordance with its own nature, right? We use Jupiter as that expression. So let's continue with Jupiter. We talked about if Jupiter was in Pisces, he can increase things. He can bring fecundity. He can bring wealth. He'll have the ability to do all of the things that he's universally significated for. He will also be able to produce all of the things that the houses that he rules. So the houses that have Sagittarius and Pisces on their cusps, he will be able to produce for those houses. If, however, Jupiter were in Capricorn, which is the opposite of, let's say Virgo, we're talking about Pisces. If he were in Virgo, which is the opposite of Pisces, then that expansive aspect of Jupiter, right? What do we think about when we think of Virgo? Nitpicking and criticism, right? Virgo rules the digestive system, which sends everything to where it's supposed to go. So it's the details, it's the getting down in the weeds, right? It's the micromanaging. That's a Virgo. That's the Virgo in action. That's the exact opposite of Jupiter. Jupiter is big picture. Jupiter is sweeping concepts, right? Jupiter is abstractions. Mercury is particularization, right? So that's how that would work. So all of a sudden, we've got a Jupiter that isn't able to act in the way that he's supposed to be acting, right? So he can't act in accordance with his own nature. He has to act in accordance with Mercury's nature, all right? So that's kind of the, shall we say, kind of the basis for what we're looking at when we're looking at detriment and fall, and also peregrination, which we will get to. So the sun is exalted in Aries. The sun is fallen in Libra. The moon is exalted in Taurus. She's fallen in Scorpio. Mercury So Gemini has no exaltation or fall. Jupiter, or rather, and it looks like, I don't think that they use, they do have exaltation to fall with the north nodes, but I don't think that they use the north node and south node for fall. I mean, I just, like I said, my way of looking at the north node and the south node is totally the Vedic way. I don't put a lot of stake in, the north node is your destiny or any of that. I mean, the jury is out. I've yet to see it actually work. If someone's worked with it and seen it kind of happen in that way, I'd love to kind of know about it and see how it worked out. But to be honest with you, I know that people tend to look at their yachts and their north nodes for my purpose and what my destiny is. I think it's a crock, personally. That's just me. Okay, so Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. He is fallen in Capricorn. No exaltation or fall in Leo. Mercury is exalted in Virgo, is fallen in Pisces. Saturn is exalted in Libra, is fallen in Aries. Now, quite a few of you are born with Saturn in Aries. So quite a few of you, if you're between 25, 24, 27, or something like that, a bunch of you will have Saturn in Aries. It will be interesting to see what houses it rules, or if you've got, or heavens to Betsy, you might have it in the first house, or something like that, because these things will definitely matter. They will definitely make a difference. And then moving to Mars. Mars is exalted in Capricorn and fallen in Cancer. All right, any questions? Because I have another thing here that I'm going to bring up that shows it even better. Okay, now if you wanted to, you could create a table like this. Hold on a second. Hey, give me about an hour. Oh. Okay, I'll bring you one thing. Sorry about that. Amazon bringing packages. I told them to come after 4. All right, sorry. Okay, so but in the meanwhile, you can see from this chart exactly what's going on with each sign. So domicile of Mars, exaltation of the Sun, detriment of Venus, fall of Saturn. So this is probably the best way to look at it. So go ahead and take your time to kind of use that. I'll continue talking a little bit more while you copy that out, because I think that's actually quite important. Okay, so when a planet is in the opposite to its domicile, it is said to be in a condition of detriment or estrangement. When a planet is in the opposite sign to its exaltation, it is said to be in a condition of fall or slavery. All right, so we talked about what detriment. So I like estrangement much more than detriment. So coming back to our little, thing here, I like estrangement because, like for instance, with Venus is, so think about the difference between Venus and Mars. Mars is the god of war. And one of the things that they talk about in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance is how Mars loves the stink of gore. He loves the crash of the battlefield and the stink of gore. Venus hates that kind of thing, right? The real Venus loves everything to be looking beautiful, loves things to be smelling really good, loves things to be, loves everything to be nice and harmonious. Harmony, that's Venus. That's especially Libran, right? So when people are always getting pissed off at their Libran friends, it's because Librans like harmony. They don't like conflict. Conflict is Martian, right? And also when we are talking about our Libran friends, we're talking about our friends with Sun in Libra, and Sun is fallen in Libra. So the Sun's not acting right. Right? If any of you follow Astrology Circle Jerk on Reddit, which is just kind of like a snark group, one of the big things that they're always saying is Librans don't have rights. It's just this. They're always kind of snarking off about Librans and how they hate Cancers and how Libras don't have rights and screw those Libras and whatever else. But look, that's why your Libra friends get on your nerves so much with this, or your Libra boyfriend or girlfriend that always acquiesces, or you who is the Libra, who is always letting the partner create the agenda and doing everything you can to make everything nice and enjoyable, and absolutely difficult for you to stand up for yourself and say what it is that you really want. There we go. If we do want to think about the Sun as ego or whatever, then when he's in his fall, he's not thinking about I, he's thinking about us. He's thinking about we. So these are ways to kind of be all of a sudden understanding that, or come to understand. Explains why my Aries ascendant always screaming at my Libra friends to stand up for them. There we go. Yes, indeed. Absolutely. And so that's why. And so, my father was a Libra. I was raised by a Libra, and I was raised by a very, I had a very, very tyrannical mother. A very kind of tyrannical, domineering mother, and my father was very retiring. And the essence of Libra hated any kind of altercation and conflict. Loved to party, loved to have a good time, loved to hang out, loved music. So all of that. So remember, Venus is music and art and the arts. So Libra, when you think Libra at its absolute best, think of Michelangelo. Right, because Libra is an air sign, so it will represent aesthetic ideals. Air represents our ideas and ideals, and so Venusian ideals are aesthetics, right? Our aestheticism and aesthetics. So something to think about. Same thing here. So I call Venus in Aries, I call her the Amazon Venus, right? Because we have the female warrior in this case, and what I've been seeing on Reddit a lot is. A lot of people with Venus and Aries are upset because they attract all these doormats, and they're sick of. They want somebody who can alpha them, but they're alphaing their own relationships. They're being the alpha in their relationship, but they want to find an alpha, right? And so I find that all the time, especially females with Venus and Aries are finding a tendency to attract men or partners. It doesn't have to be men, but partners who are more submissive, and they don't necessarily want that. They want to be able to be submissive themselves. Let's see, what's that? Super Cancer attracts all the Libra suns. I love it. Yeah, well, so then you all know where I speak. Okay, so I'm gonna let me go back to the thing. I'm gonna just keep this up for a little while I talk about the other stuff. And actually, we can even use this for peregrination in some way, just to kind of look at it. Once again, so we've looked at detriment, we've looked at domicile, we've looked at exaltation, we've looked at detriment, we've looked at fall. I'm going to talk about one more, and I don't necessarily want to call it a debility. It's considered a debility, but it's really more of a. It's more of a neutral. It's more neutral than it is a debility, and it's called peregrination. And I'm going to stop this for 1 second so you can see. So you can actually see it on the. Okay, so peregrination. So peregrinatus means to travel. So your peregrinations would be your travels. And so a planet is peregrine when it's in a sign in which it has no dignity. So remember I said there are 5 types of dignity, but we're only dealing with 2 of them right now. We're going to stick with that. But as you can see, each planet has 2 signs that it rules, 1 sign in which it is exalted, 2 signs in which it is in detriment, and 1 sign in which it is in fall. So that's 6. That's 6 signs that it's got some kind of specific relationship to. The other 6, it has no relationship. So I'm going to go back and look at some of these and give some examples. The reason I'm bringing this one up is because everybody has peregrine planets in their chart. And I wanted to, I kind of wanted to head it off at the pass, because people are going to be like, well, what if it's not neither, or blah, blah, blah. And so because I want to kind of talk about peregrine, because everybody has peregrine planets. And if you saw when I first started, I wrote down all of my planets. Almost every planet in my chart is peregrine. And I have 2 planets in detriment. But, you know, here I am teaching this class. So that doesn't, like I said, anything can be made to work in the chart on a personal level. Anything can be made to work in the chart on a personal level. Okay. So an example of a peregrine planet is the moon in Aries, or Mercury in Aries, or Mercury in Aries. Moon in Aries, Mercury in Aries. Those 2 planets would be peregrine in that sign. Now, I'm not saying Jupiter for a reason, and we'll get to it when we come later down the road when we get into actual essential dignity and all 5 of them. And we also know that Saturn is in fall, right? So we can't use these 4. So really only 2 planets are peregrine, Mercury and the moon, kind of. I mean, for the most part. In Taurus, who's peregrine? Jupiter is peregrine, Saturn is peregrine, Mercury is peregrine. In Gemini, Mars is peregrine, Venus is peregrine, the moon is peregrine. In Cancer, well, that's more difficult, isn't it? Mercury is peregrine, the sun is peregrine. So it's working out. Now, the reason I'm leaving these out is because there are some planets that represent the elements. And so I'm kind of leaving those out. But you're going to find that you have, you know, if you've got, for instance, in Cancer, if you've got Venus in Cancer, just for right now, know that that's not a peregrine placement. That's not a peregrine placement. If you've got Mars in Cancer, that's in fall, so that we already know what's going on with that, right? But for the most part, let's see, hold on a second. How do detriment and peregrine compare? Detriment, okay, here. So in my opinion, peregrine puts the planet more at the mercy of the planet who rules the sign it's in. But it doesn't, so I think here's the thing with detriment. It's in the sign of the planet that owns the sign opposite to it. So it's acting in an opposite manner to its way, right? So if Venus is in Aries, then she's a warrior. She's not a dancer. I mean, she could still be a dancer, but she could be a very, very violent and, you know, vigorous dancer. She would be violent and vigorous dancer. She could maybe still do her significations, but she's going to do them in a Martian way. And she's not going to have much access to her nature. I think that the peregrine planets, a dancer who's an assassin by night, I love it. Yeah, ooh. I love how you even brought the daytime, nighttime thing in there, because Venus is a nighttime planet. So, ooh, yes. Although Aries is a daytime sign. So maybe if she were in Scorpio, she'd be the assassin by night. Right, and the assassin needs to be silent. Scorpio is a mute sign, right? So I think Scorpio needs to be silent and unseen. And so I think the assassin is more of a Scorpio thing. But that's another Mars sign, so that would be another expression of her. We're going to look at a planet with Venus, we're going to look at a chart with Venus and Scorpio in a second. All right, not in a second, but in a little bit. So moving on, let's see. Oh, we were talking about, planets in Leo. So Mars in Leo is Peregrine. Venus in Leo is Peregrine. The moon in Leo is Peregrine. Jupiter, no, not Jupiter. Let's see. Virgo, Mars in Virgo, nope. Venus, Mercury, nope. Moon, no. Sun in Virgo. Saturn in Virgo. Jupiter in Virgo. Those three are Peregrine in that sign. No. Just Saturn and Sun. Just those two. Sorry. Saturn and Sun, Peregrine in Virgo. In Libra, just Moon. Just Moon. Just Moon. Isn't that interesting? Just Moon is Peregrine in Libra. No, dignity is the entire umbrella. So forgot the definition of dignity. If a planet is dignified, it is in one of 5 different classifications, 2 of which are domicile and exaltation. Dignity essentially means strong. It's strengthened, strong or strengthened, right? So these 2, domicile and exaltations, are dignities. These 2 are debilities or detriments. Sure, no problem. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Scorpio. So that would put, I think, pretty much the Sun and Saturn and Jupiter. Sun, Saturn, and Jupiter in Scorpio would be Peregrine. So do you see kind of what I'm talking about? Well, we're going to come to it because what you're going to do now is you're going to fill in the third. And I'd love it if you felt like you wanted to unmute yourself. I mean, if you can either unmute yourself or you can write in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable doing. But I'd love to know what's going on, basically what signs these planets are in. And if there are any planets in domicile, exaltation, detriment, or fall, or Peregrine. Now, Peregrine, you're not going to understand quite so much. I understand, I get it, but if I see a list, we can say, that one's Peregrine. Now, remember, detriment, fall, Peregrine, they all basically inhibit to some extent the planet's ability to act according to its own nature. Okay, now you're asking me about the difference between detriment and fall. Detriment and fall also imply that the planet will not be able to produce for the houses it rules as well. Not as well. I mean, there would need to be other factors that would say yay or absolutely nay. But when you see a planet, a perfect example, in almost all of the charts that I'm seeing, and it's actually teaching me a lot. We see so many charts where people say, am I destined to be alone? My love life is garbage. My relationships don't work. What's going on? Am I ever gonna meet somebody? We see those all the time. Every single chart that says that has some form of debility happening to Venus. I was thinking it would be Venus and the rule of the 7th house. But it's almost always, sometimes the 7th house is looking not so bad, but there's always something going on with her. And it's not always specifically one of these 4, because there's more ways in which a planet, we're just looking at the surface of what makes a planet strong or weak. And we're going to talk a little bit about other things that make a planet strong or weak. So go ahead and fill out that first table and see if, and actually, I guess what I would probably love for you to put in the chat is if there are any planets in domicile, exaltation, detriment, or fall. I know Lily has Moon in Cancer and she has Jupiter in Cancer. So she has a planet in domicile and she has a planet in exaltation. And then I think she has Saturn in Capricorn, which also is in Saturn in Aquarius, okay? Stop 1 second so I can open the chat again. Okay, show the screen. Most of my planets are Peregrine, but I have 1 domicile, Saturn in Aquarius, and 1 in detriment, Venus in Aries. Excellent. Jupiter in Virgo, mutual reception with Mercury and Sag. Okay, I would not do that. Okay, so those are, okay, so that's, oh, rather you, oh, that's not as a detriment, but those are two detriments. Interesting. Now I have Jupiter and Gemini in mutual reception with Mercury and Sagittarius. Those are called false receptions. I have Sun in domicile in Leo, Mars in detriment in Taurus, Jupiter exalted in Cancer, Saturn in domicile in Capricorn. All right. Oh, yes, that's Lily. Oh, wait, oh, well, I think Lily's got a similar to that too. Sophia, okay, excellent. Except she's got Sun in Cancer. Oh, let's see. Okay, so Jupiter in Pisces, Venus in Taurus, Moon in Taurus. That's a very sexual and erotic chart. Okay, Jupiter, Pisces, Venus in Taurus, Moon in Taurus. Nice. All right, well, okay, so you see kind of what we're talking, Moon in Cancer, Jupiter in Cancer, Saturn in Capricorn, Mars in Taurus in detriment. Few domicile, Gemini, Mercury, Taurus, Venus, Saturn, Capricorn, Aries, Mars. Very nice. Now, remember what Lily asked me on Thursday. Is it good or bad, right? So I don't want, one of the things that happens when we look at these things is we feel great when we've got the planets in the good places, and we feel shitty when we have the planets in the shitty places. And remember that a planet can have mixed significations. So let's, without further ado, go to accidental dignity. So we talked about essential dignity and essential debilitation. Now let's talk about accidental dignity. So accident in this term means happening or circumstance. And accidental dignity refers to a planet being strengthened or weakened by house placement. So the traditional astrologers all believed that the angles were the strongest planets in the chart. The angles of the chart are the first, the fourth, the 7th, and the 10th houses. They create the main square of the chart, okay, or the main cross of the chart. All right? And the houses after that, so 1, 4, 7, and 10. So the houses that follow those, 2, 5, 8, and 11, are called succedent houses. And then the final grouping of houses, 3, 6, 9, and 12, are called cadent. Now, the traditional astrologers believe that angular houses and succedent houses were the strongest, and that planets that were in angular and succedent houses were said to be advancement, in a state of advancement, right? So they're advancing, they're moving forward, and they're advancing towards something, towards whatever goal is supposedly happening. Planets in cadent houses were considered weak and were said to be in retreat. Now, Rob Hand, who is an amazing astrologer who I did some work with, he said that one of the main things he learned through doing astrology was that the cadent houses weren't as weak as originally thought. I don't know about that myself, personally. I mean, obviously there are people that are doing all kinds of interesting things with planets. I mean, anything can happen. Anything can happen in astrology. That's part of this mercurial common to good and bad thing. And things that look like they might not happen can happen. And remember what I also said, which also comes from Rob Hand, anything can be made to work on a personal level in the chart. Anything. So that's the first thing to remember when you have planets in detriment or a fall. Anything can be made to work in the chart. And just because it's in detriment or fall, remember, I've got Jupiter in Gemini, I've got Mercury in Sagittarius. I'm relatively articulate, I'm relatively intelligent, I'm relatively expansive and whatever. It's the areas of life that we want to look at. It's the areas of life, which is the houses, right? The houses are what I call the slices of life. So planets in angular houses are able to be fully at large. They are promoted. They can act. They have the power and the freedom to act, and they are fully at large. Okay, houses 6, 8, and 12 are considered malefics. So just like there are malefic planets, there are malefic houses. All right, so as I said, with the planets in angular houses being fully at large, so what they experienced was that planets in angular houses were the strongest. The next strongest were planets in the succeeding houses, and then the weakest were the planets in the cadent houses. Although there were houses of all types that were relatively strong. So now we're going to look at the 7 advantageous places and house strength from strongest to weakest. We'll start with house strength from strongest to weakest. So what I want you to do next is I want you to look to see what house your planets are that you just did, and I want you to write down the numbers, right? So you see I gave the first house 12 points, 10th house is 11 points, etc. So write down how many points you get. And so what's going to be interesting is how many people have strong houses by sign in weak houses by place, right? So it's very possible to have, or how many people have planets in detriment or fall that are in the first house, 10th house, or the 7th house, or 4th house. And that's fine. So while you're doing that, I'm going to bring up the 7 advantageous places. All right, and hold on 1 second. Okay. So the 7 advantageous places are, and I'm going to do it in the order, the 1st, the 10th, the 7th, the 4th, the 11th. Now in some, it's 1, 10, 7, 11, 4. 1, 10, 7, 11, 4, 5, 9. Those are considered the strong places, or the 7 advantageous places of the zodiac, or of the chart. The other places, and what you're going to see is that in almost every account, the distinction as to whether or not a place was advantageous had to do with, 1, if it were angular or succeedent, and 2, if it made some kind of aspect to the ascendant. So as you can see, the 4th house makes the 90-degree aspect to the ascendant. The 5th and the 9th house make the 120-degree aspect to the ascendant. The 11th house makes the 60-degree aspect to the ascendant. The 7th house makes the 180-degree aspect to the ascendant. Now we've got the 3rd house here, which makes a 60-degree aspect, but it's a cadent house, so it's considered less strong. Okay, so go ahead now. I'm going to bring us back to this one, so in case you didn't get all the numbers, didn't get all the points, go ahead now, and you can either put the house or you can put the point system into the chat and tell me what stuff is going on.
Antoine, sorry, can I just ask a question?
All right, if not, or questions too, if anybody has questions about what I'm talking about. Okay, no one's doing that. So what I'm going to do instead then is, oh wait, somebody did. Here we go. 47. That's too. Oh wait. Oh, no. Do it separately. So however many points for each planet. Sorry about that. Thank you. So yeah, don't add the points. Just put the points next to the planet. So if Jupiter's in the 1st house, put 12. If Moon's in the 1st house, put 12. If you see what I'm saying. Sorry about that. You're not the only one who did it, Allison. And I can see that's something I need to be a little bit clear about. Okay, so while you all are doing it, I'm going to talk to you about the planetary joys. Right? So this is another way in which planets can be strengthened. All right? So Guido Bonatti lists 4 conditions by which the planets rejoice. Can you please repeat that? Oh, so you're not adding. Okay, you're not adding the points. You're not adding the points. You're listing. You're not adding, you're listing. So think of where you're going to put the numbers as a fourth row or a fourth column, right? And so, for instance, if it says Jupiter, row 1, Cancer, row 2, exaltation, row 3, then row 4 is going to say 12 because it's in the first house. There we go. Saturn 3, Jupiter 12, Mars 11, Sun 1, Venus 8, Mercury 1. Okay, excellent. So every planet in the first house gets 12 points. Yes, it does. Yes, because we're not looking at essential dignity. We're looking at accidental dignity, right? So the difference is essential dignity is the inherent strength of the planet based on sign. Only the 7. Only the 7. So I guess if that means personal, only the classical 7 planets in this case. So only Moon to Saturn. Point table again. Oh wait, I thought that was the point table. Hold on. Oh, I see. Oh, sorry. There we go. All right. So somebody had something in the 12th house. I saw that somebody had somebody had a sun in the 12th, it looks like. All right, so while you all are doing that, I'm going to, okay, who's the, Saturn 2, someone has Saturn in the 6th, Jupiter in the 5th, Mars in the 8th, Sun in the 8th, Venus in the, what is that, the 7th, Mercury in the 9th, and Moon in the 6th. Okay, so that's how that would look. So when we do get to essential dignities, we will add. We will add, but we're not going to add just yet. All right, so while you're doing that, we're going to talk about the planetary joys. The planets have 4 character, or rather classifications, rather sun, okay, have 4 classifications of joys. Now remember, all of your planets are in houses, so they should all, be pointed, so to speak, but, just for the, whatever. We've been talking about the essentially dignified ones. I'm especially interested in the essentially dignified or the ones that are in detriment or fall. Thank you. Okay, planetary joys. I'm going to get there. First house is 12. I'm just going to bring it down so I can show a little bit of this. Okay, we're going to look at 2 of them. Planets rejoice in certain houses, and planets rejoice in certain signs. I'm moving it down. If you need it again, I'll move it back up. So here we go. The first house is the joy of Mercury. The third house is the joy of the Moon. The 5th house is the joy of Venus. The 6th house is the joy of Mars. The 9th house is the joy of the Sun. The 11th house is the joy of Jupiter. And the 12th house is the joy of Saturn. We can come back to this in a second. I just want to show it to you on the chart. All right, so Mars, his joy is the first. That's where Mercury rather. My Mercury is in the first, so my Mercury is in its own joy. Second house, nothing. Moon. So look at the names of the planets, of the names of the houses, where they've actually given the ancient Greek names of the houses. And so we can see this makes sense. The Moon is in Goddess. She's in the house of Goddess. And the Sun is in his joy in the house of God. The Sun represents religion. Remember I was talking about how Jupiter represents faith, but not religion? The Sun represents religion. The sun is the sun god, right? We go to church on Sunday. Today is Sunday. We go to church on Sunday. Good fortune is Venus, right? And there's also the house of children and pleasure, right? Fifth house is the house of sensual pleasures, all kinds of pleasures and delights. And it's through pleasure and delight that we have children, right? It's through sexual pleasure that children are begotten. Bad fortune, Mars. So Mars is good in the sixth house because bad fortune used to also be connected to enemies. And what did we say? Mars is the ruler of war and loves a fight, loves bucking against someone. What I've noticed sometimes with people with Mars in the sixth house is a lot of, what do they call them? I want to call them activists. A lot of activists have Mars in the sixth because they're fighting against something. Having something to fight against is something they get off, they kind of get off on that. Ninth house, we already talked about, the sun and God. Jupiter is the good spirit, right? He's the greater benefic, and the 11th house is called the house of the good spirit. That spirit is Saturn. That makes good sense too, right? So that makes good sense as well, because Saturn is, and also the 12th house has to do with isolation, right? And Saturn is the isolator. They call Saturn the author of solitariness, right? And that's very much a connection with the 12th house. Okay, so that's one way. That's one of the system of joys, the planetary joys. Now, if anybody has any planets in joy, that doesn't matter if they're in, now this is another thing. This is aside from essential dignity. You don't have to have a dignified planet in its joy for it to work. Now, if it's also dignified, it will work that much better. For instance, Venus in the fifth, right? Venus in the fifth will determine that person towards pleasure and enjoyment. It doesn't have to be in Taurus or Libra for that to be the case. Okay, I had an affair with a guy with Venus in the fifth, in the fifth in Aquarius, and he had a lot of that kind of Aquarian reserve, like I kind of do, but he was very into partying and sex and having fun, and not a stick in the mud at all. So Venus in the fifth, or a planet in its joy, flourishes in that house and also brings the elements of that house to the fore even that much more. Does anybody have any planets in the house of their joy? You can go ahead and write that in now. And then the next level of joys is the planets have joys by sign. So they have signs in which they are at joy. And they're all signs that they rule, and they're all signs that are reflective of their natures. So of their masculine or feminine nature, or their diurnal or nocturnal nature, because certain planets are daytime planets and certain planets are nighttime planets. So the moon is a nighttime planet, and Cancer is a feminine nocturnal sign. Mercury is either or, but he's both exalted and in domicile in Virgo, so his joy is Virgo. Venus is a nocturnal planet, and Taurus is a nocturnal sign, a feminine nocturnal sign. The sun obviously is the light of the day, and Leo is his joy. Mars is a nocturnal planet, and Scorpio is a nocturnal sign. Jupiter is a diurnal planet, and Sagittarius is his masculine diurnal nature. And Saturn is in Aquarius. Saturn is a masculine diurnal planet, and Aquarius is a masculine diurnal sign. So you can see it's imperative to not, in my opinion, it's imperative not to give Uranus Aquarius. Aquarius is the joy of Saturn. Aquarius is Saturn's favorite sign. It's where he is at his most comfortable, where he is most himself. And so to take that kind of away from him is an unfortunate thing to do. All right, you can also write in if you've got any planets. I saw some people who had Saturn in Aquarius. Maybe someone else had Sun in Leo, I saw. I don't know if I saw very many Venus and Tauruses, but so if you have any of those, you can write those in. We're going to look at a few more ways in which a planet can be strengthened or weakened, and then I'm going to bring up two charts. So any planet in conjunction, sextile, or trine to the benefics, remember the benefics are Jupiter and Venus for this conjunction, sextile, or trine. Sun for the sextile or trine. Why? Because the sun, when he's conjunct, the sun becomes malefic when he conjuncts any planet. So when a planet is conjunction, sextile, or trine to Jupiter or Venus, it is considered strengthened by the association. If a planet, any planet in conjunction, square, or opposition to the malefic, so to Saturn or Mars, is considered weakened or debilitated. To understand whether a planet is operating as a malefic or benefic, take note of its zodiacal placement, its placement by house, and its house rulership. Planets who rule the 6th, 8th, and 12th can be made into functional malefics, right? So it's not just, oh, Venus, it's good for love. It's, oh, Venus is the love goddess. What's going on with her? That's how you should be looking at things from now on. Yes, Venus is the love goddess. What's going on with her? She's in this sign. What house is she in? She's in that house. Is she in sextile or trine to the benefics? Is she in conjunction, square, opposition to the malefics? Is she combust? Right? What house does she rule? I've got this wonderful Venus in Pisces, it's exalted, but she's the ruler of the 8th house. What does that mean? The malefics can operate benefically when in their own domiciles and exaltation. Right? So any planet in its own domicile or exaltation will act in a comfortable manner, in a manner that's comfortable to it. It won't act in an abhorrent way, or an aberrant rather. It won't act in an aberrant manner. It will act in a kind of a cool, calm, and collected manner. Right? So Mars in Aries, even though that can be quite fierce, but it also should make it quite active. It should make a go-getter, a person that goes for things, etc. As opposed to somebody, I mean, if everybody with Mars in Aries was, a violent psychopath, it wouldn't make any sense. Obviously, that's not the case. Mars in Aries and in Scorpio can function well, depending on the houses they operate, houses they rule, and depending on what planets they're in any kind of aspect with. The malefics operate benefically when in their own domiciles and exaltations. The benefics operate malefically when in their detriment and fall, right? And any planet who rules the 6th, 8th, or 12th can be made functionally malefic. Any planet in bodily conjunction with the sun is debilitated, combustion, and retrogradation. Now, I see a lot of people asking about retrogradation, and the ideas of retrogradation have changed, right? Retrogradation is an especially kind of fertile area for modern astrology, because modern astrology is so interested in what's going on with the mind and what's going on with internal processes. So there's a really extensive understanding of retrogradation from a psychological standpoint. But traditionally, retrogradation was a form of debility. And Bonatti's, the first three things that he will say is, the first three debilities are if a planet is combust, if a planet is retrograde, if a planet is cadent. Okay, so those are the three things: combust, retrograde, cadent. Now, once again, anything can be made to work in a natal chart. My Jupiter is in Gemini and retrograde. I'm the one teaching this class. Okay, so it doesn't say I'm stupid. It doesn't say I can't think. I can't think in an expansive manner. It doesn't say that I can't get in control of information or organize information. But it does say it's in the 7th house, and I've never been in a long-term relationship. So that's something, right? So that's the area. And so Mercury is the ruler of the 7th. That's the area of life. I've never been in a long-term relationship. So that's the 7th house, and Mercury is ruler of the 7th in detriment, despite the reception, the mutual reception with Jupiter, which is why I called it a false reception. Retrogradation is a form of debility, especially when partnered with a planet in fall. So if a planet is in fall and retrograde, some of you might have Saturn and Aries in retrograde. That ain't good. Okay, so you want to talk about, is it good or bad? That ain't good. That ain't usually good. That doesn't usually point to anything good. That especially fall and retrograde together. Fall and retrograde together. Pay attention. Someone's going to ask, oh, is blah, blah, blah going to work? And you're going to see something in fall and retrograde, and you're going to not want to say anything. You know, you're going to see it on Reddit, and you're going to think, oh, I'll write in, and then you're going to see that planet in that retrograde and fall, and you're going to say, this happens to me all the time. Because I feel like, you know what, if I can't add something positive or at least something hopeful, I don't really want to write anything. So if it's shitty, I'm going to keep silent. So for those of you who've been writing questions and might wonder why I haven't written anything, maybe it looks shitty and I just don't want to say anything. Where is Venus in the 12th? Ooh, ouch. Yeah, so now here's the thing. So here's the thing about some of these things. Let's move to a chart, and we'll move to a chart, and I'll talk about what I'm about to talk about in that particular case, because so much of what I see also on Reddit is people wanting to use astrology to escape from their life condition, and thinking that astrology can help them to, or not even, escape from their life condition or change the karmic pattern. You see it all the time. What can I do to alleviate that? Well, was there anything I can do to change that and make that better? What other aspect can I work on to make that happen? Some things you can't, some things you can. This is what I'm going to say. My favorite astrologer, my favorite Vedic astrologer, Sanjay Rath, talks about the 3 types of karma. First of all, I go with the Vedic way of thinking about the astrology chart. The astrology chart, the entire chart is the record of your karma. It is what you chose to do. It is so when you're thinking about what am I here to do or what is my purpose, your chart is your purpose. So that means, let's say you've got ruler of the ascendant opposing ruler of the 3rd house, and it shows up as you and your brother or sister fighting all the time. That's one of the things you came here to do. So it's important to kind of get this kind of exalted idea of life purpose out of our head first, so that we can see what the actual purpose is. Because our purpose is in the chart. Remember, I was just talking about the North Node and all that other stuff. But it's not necessarily in the exalted kind of purpose that we're all hoping it points to. And so what Sanjay Rath talks about is the 3 types of karma. There are 3 types of karma. There's karma that can be changed. There's the karma that cannot be changed. And there's karma that a little bit of it can change and some of it cannot be changed. And I go with that. That's what I go with. So in the case of something like a Venus in Aries in the 12th house, that's a karma that probably won't be able to be changed, but we can change our relationship with the cycle that we attract. And that's really where we get control. It's not so much about being able to change the actual karmic cycle that comes. It's really about being able to change our reaction and our response to it when it comes, in the face of it. Okay, so this chart said, I feel scared of everything, and specifically about the future. They were talking about, I feel paralyzed about my future. I feel scared. And so when we think about feeling scared or thinking paralyzed or whatever, scared is anxious, right? If you're anxious, you're kind of scared. And so anxiety is Saturn. And then when a person says, I feel, they're speaking from the moon, right? So the moon is the I feel part, right? So look here, the moon and Saturn are both in the 11th house, right? And the 11th house is the house of future wishes and dreams, future hopes and dreams, all right? So other people know about this 11th house as what, friends and groups or whatever. Friends, yes, but there are 2 types of friends, and we talked about this last week. There are 3rd house friends who are like family. friends you grew up with, friends, and if you have friends that you've known since kindergarten, that's a third house friend. They know your family, you know their family, they're really more like a cousin, right? So third house represents siblings and relatives and neighbors, right? People really, really close and who have really firsthand knowledge of who you are, all right? But then the 11th house, friends, remember the 11th house was called good spirit. And good spirit is a personification of good, right? So that's what the good spirit is friends who help us along, friends in high places, friends who help us realize our dreams or hopes. And so what we have here is we've got the moon, I feel, and Saturn scared and anxious and paralyzed, right? Because Saturn is slow and obstacles and immovability and intractability, all of those things. We've got them both in the 11th house of hopes and dreams and future wishes. Now, Saturn is in his domicile there, and the moon is in detriment, which means that this person was also having a problem enjoying their life because the moon is the ruler of the 5th house, which is the house of enjoyment. So this person is feeling cut off from enjoyment and accomplishment, right? Good fortune accompanies accomplishment, right? So this person isn't really being able to access this 5th house good fortune. So part of that has to do with the detriment of the moon, but it also has to do with Saturn, this very strong Saturn. Now, with the ruler of the 11th in the 11th, shit should be able to happen. Shit should be able to go down. However, this is a Pisces rising chart, and in a Pisces rising chart, Saturn rules the 11th and the 12th house. The 11th house is future hopes and wishes and is good spirit. The 12th house is isolation, walled off, solitariness, and bad spirit, self-undoing, hidden enemies, self-undoing. As I've said before, I think I said it 2 weeks ago, do not ignore the 12th house as the house of self-undoing. Do not ignore it. The planets that are in it, the planet that rules it, self-undoing. And so this is what we have going on here. Because the Saturn is so strong, he should be making the 11th house work through through hard work, through laborious, hard work, painstaking detail. He should be doing it that way. But which sign is the sign of Saturn's joy? Aquarius is Saturn's joy. So Saturn is going to be, despite how strong he is in that house, he's actually going to be determined towards his 12th house nature. So he's bringing both the 11th and the 12th house into the 11th house. And notice that it was all around her future. Oh, great question. She said, if Saturn is the greater malefic, how does it find joy in a house? Saturn delights in lamentations and wailing. Ever heard of, there's a wonderful old standard called glad to be unhappy. That's Saturn. So it's not necessarily that not everybody gets joy out of the same thing. It's just kind of like with not everybody gets off on the same sexual practices. Some people like to be tied up and beaten within an inch of their life and get off on that. That's a joy, right? That's finding a joy in something that another person would find horrifying, something horrifying and abusive. Other people need it to be soft and sweet and candlelight and incense and soft music. That's a different kind of finding joy, right? That's 5th house joy, right? 12th house joy is the yogi in the cave in meditation. 12th house joy is the writer in his study getting that novel together and having no contact with anybody for 3 days. 12th house joy is depression and sadness and melancholy sometimes. So that's how Saturn finds his joy in the 12th. So this chart, as I said, it kind of shows this 12th house influence of Saturn on the 11th, which deals with our future, is interested in our future, and it brings in, even though it shows that Saturn has the ability to produce for this house. Why? Because he's in his own domicile, and the 11th house is his domicile. He's in his own sign, and and as a result, in his own domicile. So this Saturn should be able to produce. However, I mean, should be, but notice that the sun is at 23 Capricorn and Saturn is at 27. That means Saturn is in combustion. So 4 degrees. Saturn is in the deep combustion, is in full combustion. So that's another reason why maybe as the 11th house, Saturn isn't necessarily working. So here we have a kind of a way in which things that aren't working show why they aren't working. Okay, I'm going to do one more chart and then I'm going to let you go. Oh, and then I'll open it to questions and then I'll let you go. It's interesting that both of these charts that I chose started with I'm afraid. I'm intensely afraid of the pleasant parts of life. This person said, why am I only happy when life is difficult? See, that's Saturn in the 12th house. Saturn is difficulty. Saturn's in his joy of the 12th. Why am I only happy? That's how it started. Why am I only happy when my life is at its most difficult? I'm intensely afraid of the pleasant parts of life. I'm intensely afraid, there's Saturn, and of the pleasant parts, there's Venus. So Taurus is rising, and Venus is the ruler of the ascendant. And look at that. Venus is in Scorpio, in her detriment. Now, that shouldn't necessarily make this happen, as far as I'm concerned, necessarily. But there are two things, in my opinion, that are contributing to this. And it's so funny. The woman that I asked this woman if I could use the chart, and she said yes. And then she sent me a text or sent me a message saying, be sure and speak nicely about Saturn when you get to my chart. I try to honor him whenever I can. And I looked at this chart and I said, yeah, you better fucking honor him. Otherwise, he's going to kick your ass. So, yeah, although to be honest with you, she shouldn't really be honoring him. She should be honoring Mars, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, I guess you are going to honor him because he's shown up fucked up. Saturn is in Aries, which is his fall, and retrograde. Okay, so let's get into what she was talking about, why things have to be difficult, why she can't enjoy anything. So two things. Venus is enjoyment. Venus is pleasure. She's in the opposite sign. One of the things I talked about was how Taurus represents the substantiation based on things that we take pleasure in, whereas Scorpio represents elimination or evacuations of those things that we think unnecessary or deem unnecessary. Right, so this Scorpio is letting it go. Scorpio rules the genitals and the anus, right? That's where we evacuate our waste, right? That's where we eliminate our waste. And so there's an aspect of letting things go, releasing things, well, there's a different kind of holding on. They'd rather hold on to interpersonal relationships than hold on to things. Right? And also Mars in Scorpio, right? And look at the Mars here. So we've got a planet in detriment and a planet in domicile here. Mars in Scorpio is not so much interested in pleasure as he is interested in getting what it is he wants. Basically, Scorpio has an agenda. Mars in Scorpio is extremely agenda oriented and wants to get to those things consistently. Will do whatever it has to do to get to the end point of that agenda. Goal-oriented is Scorpio, Mars and Scorpio especially. Agenda and goal-oriented. And any end justifies any means. Or rather, the means justify any mean justifies the end. Right? Any mean. Okay? So we have this Venus here who represents pleasure with the planet who's not really that interested in pleasure. Right? He's interested in his goals or even Mars. Remember, Mars is Capricorn, is Mars's exaltation. So this person may need to be busy all the time. This person may need to always have a goal. This person might have a hidden agenda that they don't share with other people, or a hidden agenda that's hidden to everybody else but them, but that is motivating them and pushing them in a certain direction to always do things a certain way. This is the person who other people will shake their head at and be like, why does she always want to do? She always chooses the hardest way. Now, the other thing, and I think this is even more, is that Mars is ruler of the 12th house. Notice that Aries is intercepted in the 12th house. When a sign is intercepted, that means that there are two planets ruling one house. There's the planet that's ruling the cusp. In this case, it's Jupiter. And then there's the planet that rules the sign that's intercepted inside the house, and that's Mars. And so Mars is a co-ruler of the 12th house. We already talked about Mars or rather the 12th house as the house of self-undoing. So we know that Venus is in the sign of one of the planets who contribute to self-undoing. The other thing is that Saturn is contributing to the self-undoing because he's there, and it's his joy, right? And so one of the things about planets that are in detriment or fall, etc., is that they misbehave, they act erratically, they act in abhorrent or aberrant ways. And so this is really what's going on. Look at how the closest aspect that the moon is making. Remember, the moon is our mind. The mind that rules all of the autonomic processes in the body. The moon is the thing that tells us we're hungry. The moon part of the mind is what tells us what emotions we're having, right? And so anything impressed on the moon, any planet that's aspecting the moon, is impressing its nature onto the mind. And so what we have here is Saturn trining the moon, making it easy to get to each other. And we've got this fallen Saturn. Remember what I said, if a planet rules the 6th, 8th, or 12th, it becomes benefic. It can become benefic. Now, of course, they rule two houses, right? So in this case, it rules the 12th and the 12th and the 3rd? Or is it the 12th and the 8th in this chart, or 12th and 9th? But no, it wouldn't. And also, well, to answer your question, let's look at what's going on. What she asked me was, a benefic planet is ruling the 12th. Does that mitigate the 12th house self-undoing? And remember, so as I said, if a planet rules the 6th, 8th, or 12th, it becomes functionally malefic. The other thing is, look to see what kind of state it's in. A planet will, now the thing is that if a planet rules the 12th house and it's strong, that could be fucked up. That can be not good. If a planet is like this Jupiter, not really peregrine, but quasi-peregrine and retrograde, that can also be fucked up. Because that means, also look at who rules Aquarius, Saturn. So that means that this planet that's fucking up all of the enjoyment, right, this wet blanket, this dour, this sourpuss, is basically, oh, wait a second, I'm supposed to say nice things, but I'm not, because the Saturn is garbage. This Saturn is ruling this Jupiter. So that means that the Jupiter is acting according to Saturn, not according to him. That's a great question. Thank you so much, because you just gave us an example of peregrination, even though Jupiter is not technically peregrine, but you gave us an example of peregrination. Jupiter is in a sign ruled by another planet. Therefore, the other planet is going to dictate how Jupiter acts. Okay? And so Jupiter is also ruler of the 12th, and the planet in the 12th is his dispositor, which means Jupiter's ruling is working for Saturn. Saturn is working for Mars, and Mars is the other ruler of the 12th. So what we have here is a very, very strong, aggressive, assertive self-undoing or hidden enemy in the form of a self-undoing that's impressing its value system of austerity, austerity, lack of enjoyment, laboriousness, etc., dourness, depression, all of those things that make things hard and difficult and unenjoyable. It's impressing that on this person. Notice also that the moon is squaring the Venus and trining the Saturn. So she's got the Venusian and the Saturnian. And what did she say? I'm intensely afraid, Saturn, of the pleasant parts of life, Venus. Okay, so I'm done with my segments. If you have any questions, we can do about 5 more minutes of questions. And otherwise, we can end it there. Does anybody want me to put up anything else? Put up anything that I showed prior again? You're welcome, Allison. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, so one of the things I guess you get to see with this is how much goes into reading an astrology chart, right? It's been very simplified. It's been simplified and it's been kind of expanded into all kinds of other things that, I don't know, don't really nail it down. And maybe that's not what you want to do with astrology. This is one way of approaching it. And as I was saying to my good friend, the real virtuoso astrologer, what's the question, Anna Maria? The real astrologer or virtuoso astrologer can do all types, right? Can do this type of astrology, can do the psychobabble type of astrology, can do the Vedic astrology. I can do the Vedic and this type. The psychobabble stuff I'm not so interested in. What's the question, Anna Maria? Anna?
Can you hear me?
Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
So my question is, if a benefic planet is domicile, but then in
I can't
a
hear
bad
you.
house, you can?
You're not muted, but I can't hear you. Oh, you're muted now. Okay. Okay, now unmute. Now
Can you hear
try.
me now? Can you hear me?
Oh, say something.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. I didn't have my mic. I didn't. Yeah, thanks about that. Yeah. Okay, go for it.
The question is, if there's a benefic planet, and he's domicile, let's say Venus in Pisces, but then it's in a bad house, does it bring, how can I say this? Does it enhance the bad qualities of the house because it's strong, or because it's a benefic?
It can do both. It can do both. So usually it'll be both. So remember, Venus is not in domicile in Pisces, but so let's say it's Venus in Taurus in Pisces. I mean, Venus in Taurus in the 6th. And the 6th house is the house of illnesses. So what that would say to me, especially if Venus were in, let's say Venus were in square to Mercury, and Mercury was the ruler of the ascendant, which represents the body. That would say to me that there is a strong throat problem, or a strong or a problem with the hormones that are in the throat, like the thymus gland or the thyroid, or something like that. So in that case, it would describe by the in this particular case by the part of the body, and it would also show how strong. So that would be a strong 6th house, which means that if it's in contact with the ruler of the ascendant, it would actually be bad for the ruler of the ascendant if the ruler of the ascendant isn't strong. Let's say it's a sextile. Mercury is in Pisces, which is its fall, and Venus is in Taurus, which is her domicile, and she rules the 6th. And Mercury rules the 1st. That would definitely make that person susceptible to throat problems, because the 6th house is the illnesses. And also to venereal disease. So it could also mean that there are, that this person is too promiscuous and gets VD, or gets warts, or chlamydia, or whatever. It could be venereal diseases too. So it both. So yes and. Yes and. It could also say, because the sixth house is the house of servants. So let's say you're rich enough to have a servant, you might have a very beautiful maid, you know, or a very lovely cleaning lady that comes every 2 weeks or whatever. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, okay. All right. If nothing else, then that is our session for today. And I'm going to have to splice together the two pieces, so it'll take me a little while, but I will still go ahead and send that out to everybody. So thank you all so much for coming, and we will see you next week. Oh, next week we are doing another way of looking at the zodiac. So we're looking at the zodiac next week, and different classifications, old classifications looked at them in a new way. So ways to work with the zodiac. All right. Thanks so much and have a good evening. Thank you, everybody.